This chat is about Russia and their relationship with the Jews and how its relevance or its real importance in the story of Israel and the Jews is that the pogroms, as they're called, which are just riots, it's a Russian word for riots, really. Those were the instigators for the Zionism, the call for a national political solution to the Jewish problem, Jewish problem. And so Russia and what happened there had a significant part to play. And so I'm going to talk about that. But unrelated to trying to to this talk is I happen to be reading this book, The King, the Kaiser, and the Tsar, trying to understand the foundations of World War I and why that happened. What was the big picture for World War I? And it's interesting because it's talking about the Kaiser Wilhelm II and Tsar Nicholas II. And the book isn't about Israel at all, but in it there's a lot of detail about the things that they said or wrote as it relates to the Jews, and they both were extremely anti-Semitic. Wilhelm particularly, Wilhelm II was very anti-Semitic, and they both blamed their political problems, the problems that the people had with the monarchy, on the Jews. So that's really telling for the things that come later, especially as it relates to Germany. Hitler did not happen in a vacuum. There was a foundation there that he built off of. But anyway, so this story is about what happened in Russia. And Russia never had very many Jews. So they don't, you don't see, well, what did they do in the 1500s or the 1200s but in from 1772 to 1815, they had a time of expansion, and the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, and they absorbed some of that, and the Polish-Lithuania Commonwealth they absorbed Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Crimea, and other places during that time. And the places that were now a part of Russia had a lot of Jews. And so they had to deal with a problem that they had never had before. So the Jewish question, now the Russians had to face. And the Jewish question, which has gone through history, now we've looked at it throughout the history of Christianity in the West, is what do we do with these Christ killers who are of the devil and they're a corrupting force, and what do we do with them? And so now Russia had to deal with it. And so one of the things that the Tsars did, because they were an absolute monarchy, is they made it illegal for the kingdoms that they had absorbed, which they called the Pale of Settlements. The Jews that lived there could not come to Russia. You guys stay over there. don't come to Russia. And so that was how they dealt with it until in 1821 in Odessa, they started having the pogroms, riots, murdering and destroying of houses and synagogues and businesses. And so that began in 1821, and although the crown never said, way to go, guys, there wasn't a lot of effort put in trying not to have these happen, or punishment to holding people to account for what they had done. And so then things kind of settled down for a while. And in 1881, Alexander the Second was assassinated. So he was the Tsar, and he was assassinated in front of his son Alexander III and his grandson Nicholas II. And it had a jarring effect on Alexander III and Nicholas II, which were the next two Tsars. And so they believed their own propaganda, or believed that it was revolutionary forces, the forces of Russia had a poverty problem. They had masses of people who were living in great poverty, and they were behind in terms of industrialization, and they had a lot of issues that they were not facing. And there was a socialist movement, a communist movement. There were just trade unions, people that wanted a better life, and they wanted their government, which was the Tsar, to recognize their needs. And so those were the forces that had assassinated Alexander. But tangentially, like, out of the main players of that assassination, like way over here in left field was one Jewish person. And the assassination and the revolutionaries got lumped into a big ball that was the Jews' fault. It was just the Jews' fault. And so that caused the breakout of a real serious set of pogroms or riots against Jewish people. And Ukraine, Poland, Kiev was the worst. Warsaw, Odessa, it was Kiev had the worst, but there were hundreds of people that were murdered, and hundreds and hundreds of houses destroyed and shops destroyed. It was a pretty catastrophic for the Jewish community. And then so from that, they made the May laws, and the May laws were really designed to take the Jewish people out of the economy and out of public affairs. And those May laws were supposed to be temporary, but they lasted for 30 years, and they increased over time. The czars just kept ratcheting up. They started putting quotas. Only so many people can go to high school, or so many percentage of Jews can go to high school or university, or etc. In 1891, they expelled from Moscow almost all the Jews, except for a very small amount of useful Jewish people. And then in 1903 and 1906, the pogroms started again. And what happened during this time, where just these murders, really just murders of people were occurring across Russia, is that there was mass immigration out. The Jews were trying to figure out a way to get out of Russia, and there was a huge amount of that Jewish community, that Russian Jewish community, that made their way to the United States. But there was also, at this time, the beginning of, because of other factors, like Theodore Herzl and the Dreyfus Affair was happening in this general time frame, and there was the Jewish World Congress happened in 1897. So there were these dynamics that there was an effort to relocate the Russian Jews who needed to get out of Russia to a colony in Palestine, or in Israel, what is today Israel. So there was a connection to, or it was a catalyst to the things happening in the Zionist movement, because there was an urgent problem of these people had to find another place to go, because they were just sitting ducks in Russia. And in particular, the Jews in the United States were politically galvanized to help these people who didn't have any food to eat, didn't have anywhere to go. And for the first time, really, the American Jews began to organize themselves to help these people financially and in whatever way they could. And so in that way, what happened in Russia at the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s, or at the end of the monarchy there, was a great pivot point for global Jewry, and the concept of we have to have a solution. This isn't gonna ever stop. So that's what happened.